The wind off the Pacific tore across the asphalt pier, whipping salt water into Madison Hudson's eyes. She hoisted the log overhead, muscles burning, calves trembling against the cold, unyielding surface. Instructor Walter Myers paced, boots striking the pier with a metallic crunch, voice sharp, cutting. "Legacy means nothing here," he said, eyes narrowing on her hands, the silver ring barely visible under her glove. Madison didn't blink, jaw tight, every breath measured, every movement precise. A car door slammed. Admiral James Donovan stepped onto the pier, presence commanding, scanning the rookies with surgical precision. His gaze locked on the ring, worn, unique, unmistakable. Donovan's hand twitched, a micro-gesture of recognition he suppressed. Walter's smirk faltered. Donovan's voice, low and deliberate over the surf. "Where did you get that ring?" Madison's reply was clipped, controlled. "From my grandfather, Admiral, Master Chief Vincent Hudson." Silence dropped like concrete, the air heavy with authority, legacy, and a secret history coming alive. Every glance, every step could tip the balance. Madison had endured the mud and the mockery, but no one knew what she was capable of. The real test had only just begun, and the pier was about to become a battlefield of secrets and survival. Watch as her story unfolds.
The Pacific Ocean at Coronado stretched out in an endless, muted gray, waves churning against the shore with a cold, methodical rhythm at 0400. Madison Hudson's body screamed with exertion as she hoisted a weathered log above her head, each repetition sending tremors through her shoulders and forearms. Salt water burned her lungs with every inhalation, sharp and immediate, and droplets stung her eyes, clinging to her eyelashes like fine needles. Her hands, wrapped in tactical gloves, ached at the seams, knuckles whitening with the strain of the lift. To her left, Instructor Walter Myers prowled along the sand with the precision of a predator. The soft crunch of his boots on wet sand marked a steady, rhythmic cadence. He paused abruptly, boots planting firmly in the surf's edge, and leaned in toward Madison, his breath forming a brief, visible cloud in the frigid air. His eyes, hard and unyielding, scanned her form with surgical attention. Madison did not flinch. Her gaze remained fixed on the horizon, on the slate-gray ocean that mirrored the discipline and endurance she had been raised to embody. Walter's voice cut through the early morning wind like a serrated blade. Every word was measured, precise, intended to provoke. He questioned the Navy's judgment, mocking the very idea of little girls enduring the mud and cold of Bud S. Madison's jaw tightened, the set of her mouth deliberate, each muscle calibrated to mask any reaction. The line of her neck flexed as she exhaled, slow and controlled, masking the rapid heartbeat beneath her ribcage. Her mind cataloged the insults as data points, evaluating, anticipating, absorbing. Her right hand rested just beneath her tactical glove, the worn silver ring glinting faintly under the pre-dawn light during inspections. The ring bore the intricate insignia of a skeletal frogman entwined with a trident hand-carved decades earlier. It was a relic, a tangible connection to her grandfather, Master Chief Vincent Hudson, and the legacy that had shaped her. Each detail, the precise curves of the trident, the skeletal form etched with meticulous care, spoke of missions that existed in the shadows, of men and women who operated where recognition never followed. The morning inspection proceeded with mechanical precision until the low rumble of an approaching motorcade interrupted the drill. The roar of engines faded into the moist, salt-laden air as Admiral James Donovan stepped out, his uniform crisp, his posture unyielding. The presence of the man alone commanded an immediate, pervasive stillness. Walter's arrogance faltered under the weight of recognition and authority. His shoulders stiffened, boots planted as though fused to the sand, a rigid semblance of discipline replacing the predatory stride from moments before. Admiral Donovan's gaze swept the line of trainees with deliberate scrutiny, decades of special warfare experience guiding each measured inspection. When his eyes settled on Madison, they did not linger on her features or expression. Instead, they focused with quiet intensity on the silver ring, catching the diffuse light of the breaking day. A micro twitch of his hand betrayed recognition, suppressed almost instantly. Donovan's face remained unreadable, a mask forged over years of command. Yet the slight narrowing of his eyes and the almost imperceptible shift in stance revealed a memory long held but resurfacing with precise clarity. Madison felt the weight of his gaze but maintained her posture, shoulders squared, feet planted firmly in the sand. The air between them was taut, charged, almost imperceptibly vibrating with the silent acknowledgement of legacy and history. Donovan's approach was measured, his steps absorbing the rhythm of the surf as if syncing with the heartbeat of the training ground itself. He stopped directly before her, mere inches separating authority from determination. Madison's breath continued in careful, even strokes, chest rising and falling with the quiet patience honed from countless drills. The log above her head trembling in her grip as her arms burned with fatigue. A subtle, almost inaudible exhale escaped Donovan's lips as his hand rose briefly. Fingers flexing, thumb brushing the leather strap of his wristwatch, a gesture lost to anyone not trained to see. The history behind the silver ring hung unspoken between them, tangible and precise. Madison's expression did not shift. The cold grit of sand clung to her skin, stinging, pressing, reminding her of the hours of labor already etched into every sinew. In that moment, the ring was not an ornament. It was proof, a compass, a measure of everything that had come before and everything yet to come. Admiral James Donovan's hand twitched, a barely perceptible microgesture, fingers flexing against the polished leather of his wristwatch. He suppressed it almost immediately, the movement swallowed by decades of disciplined control. His eyes, gray and precise, locked onto Madison Hudson with the intensity of a man scanning for anomalies in the field. The morning wind carried the tong of salt and seaweed, whipping strands of her damp hair across her forehead. Yet his gaze ignored everything but the silver ring on her right hand. Recognition flickered in the edges of his vision, sharp and instantaneous. He had seen that insignia before, traced the same skeletal frogman entwined with a trident during a night extraction in a location that never appeared on any operational map. Vincent Hudson, her grandfather, had saved his life that night, pulling him from a burning hole, a sacrifice that had cost the old SEAL his own health. Walter Myers stepped forward, boots sinking slightly in the wet sand, voice carrying above the crash of the surf in the clipped cadence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. He articulated each critique with the precision of a televised commentator, each word designed to assert dominance. "Weak link," he said, eyes scanning the form of Madison as if appraising an object rather than a trainee. "Legacy filler." His tone was rehearsed, public, performative, meant to land in front of the other trainees. He did not notice the subtle tightening of Donovan's jaw, the knuckles whitening on the forearm behind his back. Donovan's face remained an unmoving mask, yet his mind cataloged everything: the cadence of the insults, the overconfidence, the presumption of control over a class that existed for discipline, not ego. Madison's posture did not waver. Her shoulders squared, fingers tightening momentarily around the log she still carried in her hands. The muscles in her forearms flexed in silent calculation. Her eyes, a steady, unbroken line, tracked the horizon, though every nerve in her body registered Donovan's scrutiny. Her breath was even, controlled, chest rising in measured strokes, heart rate modulated as if she had drilled it into submission. She catalogued Walter's words, but each syllable slid over her like wind over water. Logged not in ego, but as data, actionable and precise. The Admiral leaned in, a subtle shift of his weight forward, voice dropping to a whisper just above the sound of the waves. His proximity was measured, deliberate, the kind of distance trained into operators during close-quarters reconnaissance. He asked Madison, voice controlled and quiet, where she had obtained the ring. Her response was clipped, precise, delivered with the cadence of someone trained to make every word matter. From my grandfather, Admiral. Master Chief Vincent Hudson. The name landed in the air like a heavy-caliber round, dense with history. Walter's chest rose sharply, a staccato intake of breath he could not mask. His eyes widened, a micro-expression that betrayed a surge of uncertainty before he forced them back into a semblance of arrogance. Donovan's gaze lingered for a heartbeat longer, scanning Madison for additional signs. Searching for the faintest reflection of her grandfather's discipline in her posture, her grip, her unwavering focus. The wind whipped around them, tangling hair and uniform alike, yet Donovan's attention remained tethered to the emblem on her hand, to the continuity of legacy and precision it represented. Madison felt nothing shift outwardly, though internally a faint, familiar heat of resolve spread through her veins. The ring was no longer just a token. It was a signal, a lineage of operational integrity and silent courage, now acknowledged in the eyes of the man who had once owed his life to the hand that wore it first. The surf continued its relentless rhythm, yet in that moment, time contracted, leaving only the measured inhale of her lungs, the subtle twitch of Donovan's fingers, and the widening of Walter's pupils as history made itself known. Walter Myers did not relent. The knowledge of Madison's lineage, the weight of the silver ring, had not softened him. It had ignited a deeper, corrosive resolve. In the days following Admiral Donovan's visit, the exercises and inspections escalated beyond the bounds of standard Bud-S discipline. Each assignment became a test designed to push Madison to the edge of physical and mental endurance, but the edge he sought was personal, vindictive, surgical in its cruelty. She found herself assigned extra credit details that were not only unnecessary, but humiliating. In the dead of night, she scrubbed the pier plank by plank with a toothbrush, her gloves soaked through, fingertips blistering. During ruck marches, she carried double the prescribed weight, her back and legs straining, calves burning like iron as she kept pace with the formation. Every night, her hands bore the evidence of friction and salt, skin raw and peeling. The small cuts on her knuckles were a record of relentless repetition, each one a silent ledger of endurance. She observed Walter from peripheral angles, catching the subtle arcs of his posture and the twitch at the corner of his eye when he believed no one noticed. His focus was no longer solely on tactical proficiency. It had become a mechanism for dominance, a quiet assertion of power designed to elicit a door drop on request before the Admiral could intervene again. Madison catalogued anomalies with the precision of a field operative. Supplies went missing, accountability sheets subtly altered, contractor deliveries inflated in both quantity and quality. She noticed the inventory discrepancies. The night vision goggles that should have been functional arriving with scratched lenses and frayed wiring. She watched Walter pocket the difference, the smallest shift in his uniform, the glint of a wristwatch catching dim light, betraying a transaction unspoken. Her grandfather's lessons on operational integrity ran through her mind like protocol reminders: observe, analyze, document, act with discretion. The hours of cold, salt, and exertion sharpened her senses. The rhythm of waves, the scrape of boots against sand, the faint metallic scent of rations, all became data points. every micro-expression, from the tightening of Walter's jaw to the subtle curl of his lips when issuing a command, mapped onto the pattern of his behavior. Madison's awareness extended beyond her own suffering. It encompassed the structural rot he had allowed to fester, the erosion of discipline disguised as authority. One evening, after a ruck march that had left her lungs burning and her muscles trembling, she was summoned to a small, nondescript office within the command building. The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and ink, the fluorescent lights overhead flickering in measured cadence. Admiral Donovan sat behind a desk layered with yellowing files, the topmost marked with the Navy insignia, but otherwise crowded with scattered notes and a single grainy photograph of a SEAL team from 1972. He did not gesture to a chair. Madison remained standing, posture perfect, heels and toes aligned. Hands clasped behind her back, absorbing the faint smell of tobacco lingering in the air. Donovan's eyes measured her in silence, the subtle narrowing of his eyelids and the barely perceptible tilt of his head registering as the assessment of a commander scanning for a scout's value. His voice, when it came, was calm but deliberate, precise in modulation. He explained he was conducting a quiet audit of the training command's leadership, a methodical review designed to circumvent bureaucratic lag while assessing the integrity of those in authority. He requested her unvarnished observations of Instructor Walter Myers, emphasizing discretion and precision over conjecture. Madison's lips pressed into a thin line, shoulders squared, and she absorbed the directive as if it were a tactical order. The mission was clear, the risk understood. She acknowledged silently, her breath slow, controlled, each inhalation mapping the weight of the task ahead. The room settled into a taut quiet, broken only by the hum of the ventilation and the faint scrape of Donovan's pen against paper. Madison felt the alignment of duty and legacy converge, the lessons of her grandfather, the weight of the silver ring and the necessity of measured observation. In that moment, standing within the small office, she was not a trainee subjected to petty cruelty. She was an operative, cataloging, assessing, preparing for action under the watchful eyes of one who had once owed his life to the hand that had worn the ring decades before. Madison Hudson stood at rigid attention in the dim light of the command office, her boots planted firmly on the linoleum, shoulders squared, back taut as a rifle stock. Her hands were clasped lightly behind her, fingers brushing the seams of her tactical gloves, knuckles pale but steady. Her eyes remained level with Admiral Donovan's, a quiet line of focus that did not waver as the surf beyond the building drummed against the shoreline. She did not flinch at the echo of the wind rattling the window panes or the distant, intermittent calls of trainees in the night. Her breathing was controlled, each inhale precise, each exhale measured, the rhythm of an operative trained to conserve energy and maintain clarity under stress. She began, her voice low and even, articulated with the clipped precision of a soldier reporting on critical intel. She recounted the missing inventory in the arms room, noting quantities, dates of discrepancy, and observed deviations in the issuance logs. She described Walter Myers' prioritization of humiliation over tactical proficiency, emphasizing specific examples. Drills extended beyond operational necessity. Forced repetitive calisthenics conducted in conditions designed to degrade physical capability, and selective penalization of trainees based on perceived weakness. Every word was deliberate, stripped of emotion but weighted with the gravity of operational consequence. Her eyes betrayed no reaction to Donovan's silent acknowledgement, though she noted the subtle constriction of his jaw, the microtick in his left eyebrow as he absorbed the implications. Donovan remained seated behind his cluttered desk, hands steepled, his gaze scanning Madison while simultaneously mapping the breadth of the problem she described. The folds of his uniform were crisp, the insignia of his rank reflecting the dim glow from the desk lamp. He did not interrupt. His attention was methodical, the quiet processing of a career shaped by decades of evaluating both men and systems. The patterns she described were not merely disciplinary infractions, they were systemic liabilities. Walter's conduct extended beyond personal vendetta. It threatened the cohesion, readiness, and safety of every team member under his oversight. Madison's eyes flicked briefly to the photograph on the desk, a grainy black-and-white image of a SEAL team from 1972. She did not smile. The photo was not a relic. It was a measure of lineage, a reminder of the standards her grandfather had embodied, and of the expectation that she now carried forward. Her attention shifted back to Donovan. She made her offer with the calm, measured certainty of a field operative briefing a superior. She knew where Walter kept his private logs, a so-called black book chronicling his personal assessments, power plays, and unsanctioned favors. She proposed a discreet operation during the upcoming night navigation exercise, the environment providing cover and plausible deniability. If she could retrieve the ledger, the hard evidence would bypass bureaucratic delays inherent to a standard investigation. Donovan's face remained neutral, mask-like, but subtle signs revealed his consideration. A flicker across his lower lip, a faint twitch near the corner of his eye, and the near imperceptible tilt of his head betrayed the calculus running through decades of operational experience. The risk was considerable. If Madison were caught, her career would end before it truly began. Yet the resolve in her gaze, the same precision, control, and calculated risk-taking that had defined Vincent Hudson, was unmistakable. Her jaw set, eyes unwavering, hands poised yet relaxed. The fire of lineage, quiet but undeniable, radiated from her posture and expression. After a long pause, Donovan gave the subtlest nod, almost imperceptible, a silent authorization. The acknowledgement was not verbal, but it conveyed everything: the freedom to act, the responsibility to execute flawlessly, and the understanding that failure was personal and irrevocable. Madison registered the nod, her shoulders relaxing by millimeters. The smallest release of tension before recommitting to the task with disciplined precision. The office remained silent save for the hum of the ventilation system, the distant surf, and the subtle echo of her own controlled breathing. She absorbed the weight of the moment, mentally mapping contingencies, rehearsing timing, and embedding every detail into the matrix of her operational plan. The night was a velvet black, the Pacific horizon swallowed in shadows, waves breaking with muted rhythm under the absence of moonlight. Madison Hudson moved with deliberate silence, each footfall measured, her body a study in controlled kinetics. The surf rose to waist level around the rest of the class, their forms bobbing and shifting in the cold saltwater exercises, voices muffled by the crashing swell. She let the simulated casualty drill serve as her cover, her movements calculated to appear incidental, a ripple in the operational flow, unnoticed by instructors or trainees alike. The camo fabric of her uniform blended into the darkness, sand and surf leaving a fine, gritty residue along her sleeves and boots. Her heart struck against her ribs, a metronome of awareness rather than fear. Each beat registered as she closed the distance toward the instructor's barracks. Every inhalation was measured, controlled. Every exhale minimized to reduce sound and maintain operational discretion. The faint metallic scent of salt, sweat, and seawater clung to her, mingling with the faint tong of ozone from the surf. Her eyes scanned the path ahead, adjusting to low light, pupils widening to capture minute shifts in shadow, microsignals of patrols or environmental hazards. Reaching the barracks, she crouched, a shadow folding in on itself, assessing the door. The lock was rudimentary, a relic of administrative oversight, and she bypassed it with the shim fashioned from a discarded ration tin, sliding the thin metal with precise, fluid movements. The latch gave without sound, a controlled compromise achieved through repetition and muscle memory. She eased inside, shoulders brushing the frame, absorbing the change in atmosphere immediately. Stale coffee. The acrid curl of cheap cigars lingering in the air, the faint hum of fluorescent lights left flickering in the hall. The office was small, utilitarian, yet meticulously arranged for the perception of control. Madison's eyes traced the lines of the furniture, noting the desk's weight, the positioning of the locker, and the subtle angles that could provide concealment. Her gloved hand found the hidden latch behind a false back in Walter's locker, revealing the ledger. The paper smelled faintly of tobacco and ink, the edges worn from repeated handling. Flipping through the pages, her fingers traced the precise, neat entries that chronicled more than standard administrative notes. Blood ran cold in her veins as the ledger unfolded a systematic manipulation, candidates fast-tracked based on donations to an offshore account, privileges granted for compliance, and humiliations selectively assigned to maintain the illusion of meritocracy. The scope of the scheme was deliberate, sophisticated, and hidden beneath the veneer of routine military discipline. A sudden sound fractured the stillness, the echo of heavy boots against the linoleum corridor, the faint scuffing of leather-soled shoes. Madison's body tensed, muscles coiling, heart rate controlled despite the rapid pulse she felt in her temples. The door handle turned, and instinct brought her low, sliding beneath the oak desk in a motion honed from years of observation and practice. The dark wood pressed against her forearms, providing a solid frame while obscuring her presence. Walter entered, the civilian contractor close behind. Voices subdued but carrying a frantic urgency, cadence clipped and precise, words falling in hushed bursts. They discussed coordinates, schedules, and the next shipment of surplus night vision goggles equipment meant for official issue, now diverted to unauthorized channels. Madison remained motionless, absorbing every inflection, every microgesture, the twitch at the corner of Walter's eye, the way the contractor's fingers drummed lightly on his thigh, betraying the anxiety he attempted to mask. Every line of dialogue was logged internally, a catalog of evidence beyond what the ledger had revealed. Her breathing was shallow, controlled, each exhale synchronized with the ambient rhythm of the hall. Time slowed, yet her mind moved at operational speed, recording, analyzing, anticipating. She waited for the shift in conversation, the moment when both men became engrossed in their clandestine coordination, providing her the window to act. Beneath the desk, her gloved fingers flexed around the ledger, ready to extract, secure, and exit with the precision demanded by protocol and necessity. Madison Hudson remained still beneath the heavy oak desk, the ledger pressed against her forearm, her fingers curling into the paper until the tips went numb. Every inhale was shallow, precise, drawing only enough oxygen to keep her senses sharp. Her eyes tracked Walter Meyer's polished boots as they shifted back and forth across the linoleum floor. The scuff of leather against the surface punctuating the rhythm of the conversation above. The civilian contractor's soft shoe taps provided a second layer of sound, subtle but enough to register in Madison's heightened auditory field. Through the small gap between the desk and the floor, she saw Walter speak in clipped, calculated bursts, his voice low, edged with urgency. Coordinates were mentioned, phrases like edge of the base and blind spot in the remitter fence delivered with the precision of someone who believed he had considered every variable. The contractor nodded, fingers brushing the concealed sidearm at his hip, the movement subtle but deliberate. Madison memorized the details with the same precision she would have mapped a landing zone: distances, environmental factors, timing sequences, each micro-expression, the twitch at the corner of Walter's eye, the curl of the contractor's leap revealed urgency, overconfidence, and a faint hint of self-preservation. When the two men finally departed, the silence of the office enveloped her. Madison exhaled slowly, letting her muscles relax just enough to move without detection. She extracted the ledger carefully, ensuring no ink smears or pages bent. Every movement was deliberate, every step measured. Instead of returning to the surf, she headed directly for the secure communications office. Her boots muted by the rubberized matting in the hallway, she accessed Admiral Donovan's secure line, transmitting the compiled intelligence and confirming the coordinates, timing, and personnel involved. The click of the handset returning to its cradle echoed like a starting signal, the chain of command now aware, mobilized, and prepared. 2 hours later, Walter approached the perimeter fence, expecting the transaction to proceed unobserved. He did not anticipate the landscape altered by human precision. Tactical flares deployed, flooding the blind spot with harsh white light, exposing the contours of terrain he had assumed would provide cover. His pace faltered slightly as the sudden illumination cut through the darkness, reflecting off his polished boots and crisp uniform, highlighting the tension that even he could not mask. The Master-at-Arms team converged from multiple directions, their boots crushing gravel with coordinated authority. Weapons held in readiness but unthreatening until the target could be contained. Walter's eyes darted across the sudden tableau, seeking escape routes, calculating probabilities, but each option was anticipated and blocked. Then, from the shadows, Admiral Donovan emerged. His silhouette was framed by the flares, uniform immaculate, insignia catching the light with the weight of authority carried effortlessly. Walter's mouth opened, stammering excuses about extracurricular training, his face pale, sweat beading along his hairline and temples. His breaths came in shallow bursts, the calculated confidence of earlier replaced by the raw, instinctual fear of exposure. Donovan remained still, expression unreadable, his hand lifting only to display the ledger Madison had recovered. The gesture was controlled, deliberate, weighted with decades of operational authority, speaking volumes without a single word uttered. Before the MPs could secure Walter, the contractor drew a sidearm. The sudden metallic flash and shift in posture revealing panic beneath his professional facade. Fingers tightened on triggers, muscles coiled, but the encirclement was precise, escape vectors calculated. Each step, each micro-adjustment of position by the security detail accounted for potential variables, neutralizing threat without unnecessary escalation. Madison watched from her vantage point, noting the contractor's subtle hesitation, the tilt of his shoulders, and the tightening of his jaw, complete portrait of imminent failure born from overconfidence. The trap, executed with measured patience and operational clarity, had closed. Walter's network, the contractor's complicity, and the ledger's evidence all converged under the discipline of planning and inherited precision. The culmination of Hudson's quiet professionalism and the Admiral's silent orchestration. Walter Meyer's hands clawed at the jagged outcrop, knuckles whitening against the salt-streaked granite. Below him, the Pacific boiled and churned, waves smashing against rocks with bone-deep resonance. Each gust of wind tugged at his uniform, and each crash of water echoed the futility of his position. His chest heaved, lungs burning with exertion and fear, eyes darting upward to Madison Hudson standing firm above him. Every micro-twitch of his jaw, the slight widening of his pupils, betrayed a man stripped of his performance armor, reduced to raw, unfiltered terror. Madison's silhouette was outlined against the pale glow of the moon, uniform dark against the silver reflection on the surf. Her posture was deliberate, centered, the weight of years of training and inherited discipline settling into every line of her frame. Her gloved hands rested lightly at her sides, ready but unprovoked. The faint creak of tactical boots on gravel beneath her imperceptible, except to her own acute senses. Her breathing, though labored from exertion, remained measured, almost ritualized. She did not offer a hand, yet she did not allow him to fall, maintaining control over the spatial and psychological advantage. Walter's voice cracked as he attempted to speak, words garbled and incoherent under the weight of panic. Madison did not respond. Her eyes traced his movements with clinical precision, noting every finger splay, the subtle tremor of a forearm, the shift in weight that signaled desperation. The storm of night and sea became a backdrop to the confrontation. A controlled chaos in which Madison remained the singular constant of clarity. The first MPs reached the perimeter, boots firm against stone and gravel, the subtle clink of restraints and tactical gear audible only to trained ears. Madison's gaze followed their approach until they were positioned, each step precise, each stance deliberate. Walter's attempts at recalculation faltered under the encroaching authority, his previous cunning eroded by the immediacy of capture. The MPs moved in, efficient and silent, their hands securing him in chains, wrists bound with cold metal that bit into his flesh. The expression on his face shifted from terror to disbelief, a fleeting recognition of the scope of his miscalculation. Once he was restrained, Madison allowed herself the briefest exhale, a tightening and release of muscles that had maintained alertness for hours. She stepped back slightly, the silver ring on her finger catching the moonlight, the faint gleam a tangible connection to her grandfather, Vincent Hudson, whose legacy had guided every micro-decision that brought her here. Her eyes lingered on the turbulent water below, a reflective pause, measuring the cost of discipline and precision, both hers and those she had observed in Walter. The investigation unfolded in measured, methodical waves. Each ledger entry, each documented transaction, each whistleblower account was cross-verified, compiled, and logged. Walter's network unraveled with precision, contractors and complicit officers identified, and the offshore accounts traced to the donors whose names carried weight across the Navy and the civilian elite. The scandal reverberated through command channels. Yet Donovan's oversight ensured that focus remained on institutional integrity, not personal vengeance. Madison's report, her ledger, and her observations became evidence of operational oversight and ethical enforcement rather than a vehicle for spectacle. Weeks later, in the Admiral's office, Madison stood at attention as Donovan placed a small, weathered box before her. The worn wood carried a weight beyond its size. Inside rested a commendation medal, its patina marking decades of precedent and honor. Beneath it, folded carefully, lay a handwritten letter. Vincent Hudson's handwriting, precise, deliberate, commanding. The words were addressed to the next Hudson to wear the ring, a transmission of legacy, authority, and moral compass entrusted to Donovan decades prior. Madison's fingers traced the creases of the paper, absorbing the gravity of responsibility, the inheritance of silent discipline and operational integrity. The room was quiet. The only sound, the faint hum of air circulation and the soft shift of her uniform as she adjusted stance. Donovan observed her, expression unreadable but eyes conveying approval and recognition. A silent acknowledgement that the burden of inheritance had been met with the discipline, courage, and quiet professionalism that defined both Hudsons. Madison's chest rose and fell steadily. The air in the room seemed heavier, dense with the weight of completed duty and accountability. Her eyes lingered on the medal and the letter, internalizing the significance. Justice executed without spectacle. Authority exercised with precision and legacy reclaimed with calculated restraint. She did not smile, did not speak. Her presence alone communicated comprehension, acceptance, and readiness for the continuation of the path laid before her. The chapter of reckoning closed, the framework of future service solidified in the silence of the Admiral's office. Madison held the letter carefully, the parchment stiff beneath her fingers. Vincent Hudson's handwriting precise and deliberate, each stroke of ink a reflection of a man who measured every action, every word, every consequence. Her eyes traced the loops and lines, absorbing the cadence of authority and expectation that her grandfather had imbued in every generation of his lineage. The words were not sentimental. They carried weight, a quiet codification of duty, of operational integrity, of service beyond self. She felt the pull of the trident not as decoration, but as responsibility, a burden to uphold standards that were invisible to the untrained eye, but vital to the survival of teams, missions, and men and women who trusted one another with life itself. Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes, unbidden and unwelcome. The accumulation of months spent under Walter Meyer's calculated torment and subtle degradation. The skin around her jaw tightened, a habitual reflex of control, as she inhaled slowly through her nose, letting the salt and sand-tinged air fill her lungs. Her knuckles whitened around the letter, gripping it not out of anger but with a measured intensity, a channeling of the quiet ferocity her grandfather had instilled in her. The memories of scrubbing pier decking under a moonless sky, of carrying double the weight during ruck marshes, of observing the small but deliberate thefts of equipment, every detail etched itself into her awareness. Each act a lesson in vigilance and endurance. Returning to the Bud as compound, she moved among the class with an ease that belied the crucible of experience she had endured. The seasoned Master Chief now in command cast a watchful eye over the rookies, his evaluation not swayed by superficial bravado, but by grit and consistency. Madison's presence shifted the subtle dynamics of the formation. Teammates no longer regarded her through the lens of gender or seniority. They measured her by action, by quiet efficacy, by the demonstration of judgment under pressure. Each micro-expression in their face an appreciative nod, a quickened blink, the fraction of a second alignment of stance when she passed spoke volumes about the recalibrated perception of capability. She kept her silver ring on, nestled against her tactical glove during drills and exposed during inspection cycles. The hand-carved frogman entwined with a trident gleamed faintly against her skin, catching light on a bruise she had earned during the previous week's exercises. It was a tactile reminder of inherited standards, a compass for decision-making under duress. Her gaze frequently flicked to it as she moved through obstacle courses, water confidence drills, and extended endurance runs. Her movements were precise, controlled. Every step measured, every breath modulated, every micro-adjustment of balance and grip informed by years of observed discipline. Hell Week loomed, the apex of physical, mental, and emotional endurance. Other rookies whispered nervously about the approaching tide of exhaustion, the extreme hypothermia drills, the sleep deprivation, the constant pressure to perform in synchronized teams under relentless oversight. Madison felt a different undercurrent, a steady calm that coiled in her abdomen, settled in her shoulders, and moved into her fingers and toes. It was the calm of preparation, of knowing the ground she stood on, of having navigated threats far subtler and more corrosive than the brute force of water and sand. Her jaw unclenched slightly as she flexed her fingers, a small but significant acknowledgement of readiness. The awareness of team cohesion, of watching for micro-signals from peers in the water, of noticing fatigue patterns, of assessing the immediate tactical environment, flowed through her. Every choice she made was calibrated. Every stride, every reach, every motion reflected not only personal survival, but operational integrity, echoing the guidance and ethos instilled by Vincent Hudson decades prior. She allowed herself one final glance at the ring before securing it beneath her uniform. It would remain her compass, unseen but constant, as she moved into the crucible of Hell Week. The horizon stretched gray and unbroken beyond the surf, a silent witness to her journey. Madison Hudson understood fully that the path ahead would demand more than strength or endurance. It would demand adherence to the principles that had guided her grandfather, and now that would guide her. In the shadows and the mud, in the water, and on the pier, the rookie who had been tested and tormented now carried herself as an inheritor of legacy. Respect was no longer granted by proximity, by assignment, or by age. It was earned in silence, in action, and in the unwavering commitment to the code she now embodied. Madison's eyes narrowed subtly, pupils dilated with focused anticipation, and she stepped forward into the waiting challenge, every movement precise, every heartbeat a declaration of readiness. The morning sun cut across Coronado Beach in slashes of gold against the uniform white of the graduates. Madison Hudson stood at the front of the formation, her posture precise, shoulders squared, spine locked, heels pressed into the sand. Each breath she drew was measured, chest rising and falling in controlled rhythm, as though the air itself carried a weight she had been preparing for since the first log lift at 0400. When the Pacific spray burned her lungs. Around her, the rookies mirrored the drill, faces set, eyes forward, hands at seam. But Madison's presence held a different gravity. An unspoken authority earned in the mud, the surf, and in moments no one else had seen. Admiral Donovan moved along the ranks, his gaze steady, scanning the young warriors as if assessing not just their form, but their core. When he reached Madison, the briefest micro-adjustment, a twitch at the corner of his eye, a tightening of his jaw betrayed recognition of something far deeper than protocol. He didn't speak. He extended the sealed trident, fingers firm on the polished metal as he pinned it to her uniform. The gesture carried weight beyond ceremony. The salute that followed was crisp, a perfect intersection of military precision and personal acknowledgement. Madison returned it with equal exactitude, eyes meeting his for a single heartbeat, conveying respect, understanding, and the quiet resolve of someone who had survived trials few could imagine. As the formalities concluded, the crowd's applause rippled across the sand, but Madison's focus remained narrow, anchored. She stepped off the line with deliberate cadence, boots compressing the damp grains beneath her. Her gaze settled on the horizon, where the water met sky in a seamless gray-blue expanse, the same expanse her grandfather had traversed in decades of service. Fingers curled around the silver ring still resting on her right hand, tracing the contours of the skeletal frogman entwined with the trident. It was worn, the metal polished unevenly by time and use, a silent chronicle of Vincent Hudson's life and the standards he had set. She slid the ring from her finger, studying it in the morning light. Its weight was familiar, grounding. Madison threaded it onto a chain, tucking it beneath the front of her uniform where it lay against her heart, a compass for the choices that would follow beyond Coronado. The muscles in her jaw relaxed slightly, the flicker of tension at her temple easing as she exhaled slowly. Her eyes traced the motion of waves breaking and folding, each crest a subtle reminder of endurance, of action taken, and consequences measured. Turning from the ocean, Madison's gaze swept across her team. Now colleagues and equals, each shaped by the rigors of training yet unaware of the depth of trials she had faced beyond their observation. Her steps were purposeful, heels leaving shallow impressions in the sand that the surf would soon erase. But the impact of her presence remained. Every micro-expression, the flicker of acknowledgement in a teammate's eyes, the subtle tightening of a shoulder as they passed reflected unspoken recognition. She carried no arrogance. Her authority was rooted in action, discernment, and the quiet professionalism instilled by Vincent Hudson and tempered through the crucible of Bud S. The sun climbed higher, bathing the beach in warmth, but Madison's focus remained internal. Her hand flexed against the chain, a tactile reminder of legacy transformed into personal responsibility. The weight of the trident on her chest mirrored the metaphorical weight she had carried through inspection lines, night exercises, and confrontations that had tested more than physical endurance. They had tested judgment, restraint, and moral clarity. She inhaled the salt-laden air again, allowing herself a small nod to the horizon. The steel within her, honed in sand, surf, and sweat, was no longer just survival. It was readiness. Each movement forward was measured, deliberate, and informed by a history she had chosen to honor. Madison Hudson, once a trainee under scrutiny, now embodied the future of the teams, a living continuum of discipline, integrity, and operational excellence. With one final glance at the horizon, she moved toward her new team. Footsteps firm, posture exacting, presence unmistakable, she joined them. The trident gleamed faintly against her chest beneath the uniform, and the silver ring nestled against her heart. The past had been honored, the trials survived, and the future claimed with quiet certainty. If you want to follow more stories of discipline, legacy, and the quiet professionalism of warriors, make sure to subscribe to the channel. The morning sun cut across Coronado Beach in slashes of gold against the uniform white of the graduates. Madison Hudson stood at the front of the formation, her posture precise, shoulders squared, spine locked, heels pressed into the sand. Each breath she drew was measured, chest rising and falling in controlled rhythm, as though the air itself carried a weight she had been preparing for since the first log lift at 0400. When the Pacific spray burned her lungs. Around her, the rookies mirrored the drill, faces set, eyes forward, hands at seam. But Madison's presence held a different gravity. An unspoken authority earned in the mud, the surf, and in moments no one else had seen. Admiral Donovan moved along the ranks, his gaze steady, scanning the young warriors as if assessing not just their form, but their core. When he reached Madison, the briefest micro-adjustment, a twitch at the corner of his eye, a tightening of his jaw betrayed recognition of something far deeper than protocol. He didn't speak. He extended the sealed trident, fingers firm on the polished metal as he pinned it to her uniform. The gesture carried weight beyond ceremony. The salute that followed was crisp, a perfect intersection of military precision and personal acknowledgement. Madison returned it with equal exactitude, eyes meeting his for a single heartbeat, conveying respect, understanding, and the quiet resolve of someone who had survived trials few could imagine. As the formalities concluded, the crowd's applause rippled across the sand. But Madison's focus remained narrow, anchored. She stepped off the line with deliberate cadence, boots compressing the damp grains beneath her. Her gaze settled on the horizon, where the water met sky in a seamless gray-blue expanse, the same expanse her grandfather had traversed in decades of service. Fingers curled around the silver ring still resting on her right hand, tracing the contours of the skeletal frogman entwined with the trident. It was worn, the metal polished unevenly by time and use, a silent chronicle of Vincent Hudson's life and the standards he had set. She slid the ring from her finger, studying it in the morning light. Its weight was familiar, grounding. Madison threaded it onto a chain, tucking it beneath the front of her uniform where it lay against her heart, a compass for the choices that would follow beyond Coronado. The muscles in her jaw relaxed slightly, the flicker of tension at her temple easing as she exhaled slowly. Her eyes traced the motion of waves breaking and folding, each crest a subtle reminder of endurance, of action taken and consequences measured. Turning from the ocean, Madison's gaze swept across her team. Now colleagues and equals, each shaped by the rigors of training yet unaware of the depth of trials she had faced beyond their observation. Her steps were purposeful, heels leaving shallow impressions in the sand that the surf would soon erase. But the impact of her presence remained. Every micro-expression, the flicker of acknowledgement in a teammate's eyes, the subtle tightening of a shoulder as they passed reflected unspoken recognition. She carried no arrogance. Her authority was rooted in action, discernment. and the quiet professionalism instilled by Vincent Hudson and tempered through the crucible of Bud S. The sun climbed higher, bathing the beach in warmth, but Madison's focus remained internal. Her hand flexed against the chain, a tactile reminder of legacy transformed into personal responsibility. The weight of the trident on her chest mirrored the metaphorical weight she had carried through inspection lines, night exercises, and confrontations that had tested more than physical endurance. They had tested judgment, restraint, and moral clarity. She inhaled the salt-laden air again, allowing herself a small nod to the horizon. The steel within her, honed in sand, surf, and sweat, was no longer just survival. It was readiness. Each movement forward was measured, deliberate, and informed by a history she had chosen to honor. Madison Hudson, once a trainee under scrutiny, now embodied the future of the teams, a living continuum of discipline, integrity, and operational excellence. With one final glance at the horizon, she moved toward her new team. Footsteps firm, posture exacting, presence unmistakable, she joined them. The trident gleamed faintly against her chest beneath the uniform, and the silver ring nestled against her heart. The past had been honored, the trials survived, and the future claimed with quiet certainty. If you want to follow more stories of discipline, legacy, and the quiet professionalism of warriors, make sure to subscribe to the channel.